The heavy oak door slammed shut, echoing like a gavel through the penthouse, and for a fleeting second, Madeline Hayes prayed it was the last time she'd hear it. Her vision swam, the room tilting as she collapsed onto the imported Persian rug, her breath coming in ragged, painful hitches. She didn't reach for the phone to call the police. Her abuser's brother was a detective with a badge he used like a weapon. Instead, with trembling, fractured fingers, she dialed a number she hadn't touched in 2 years. 17 minutes later, the underworld answered. Madeline Hayes had spent the last 14 months perfecting the art of the illusion. To the outside world, the high society patrons of the Newbury Street Art Gallery where she worked, the acquaintances who double-tapped her curated Instagram photos, and the neighbors in the exclusive Commonwealth Avenue building, she was living a modern-day fairy tale. Her boyfriend, Bradley Jenkins, was the youngest vice president at a prestigious Boston financial firm. He was charismatic, impeccably dressed, and wielded his wealth like a magic wand. But behind the heavy mahogany doors of their penthouse, the fairy tale was a rotting facade. It started with small things. A tightly gripped wrist when she spoke to a male colleague at a gala. The sudden demand to see her text messages. The systematic isolation from her college friends. Bradley didn't just want to love Madeline, he wanted to own her. And tonight, the fragile glass house they lived in finally shattered. The trigger had been nothing more than a polite conversation. During a charity dinner at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, Madeline had spent 3 minutes discussing a modernist painting with a gallery client, a venture capitalist named Jonathan Pierce. She had smiled. That was her crime. The ride home in the back of Bradley's hired town car was suffocatingly silent. The moment the electronic deadbolt clicked shut in their apartment, the temperature in the room plummeted. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Bradley's voice was deceptively quiet as he unfastened his silk tie. "Notice what, Brad?" Madeline asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. She kicked off her heels, instinctively backing toward the kitchen island. "Mr. Pierce is a collector. He was asking about the new exhibit. He was looking down your dress, Madeline, and you were practically begging him to." "That's insane. I was doing my job." She didn't even see his hand move. The backhand strike caught her across the left cheekbone, the force of it snapping her head to the side and sending her crashing into the marble countertop. A sharp, blinding white light exploded behind her eyes. Before she could process the pain, Bradley's hands were in her hair. He threw her to the hardwood floor, the impact driving the breath from her lungs. "You disrespect me in public?" he snarled. His face twisted into an ugly, unrecognizable mask of rage. He kicked her in the ribs, a sickening crack echoing through the sprawling living room. Madeline curled into a fetal position, raising her arms to protect her head, but the blows kept coming. He struck her with a terrifying, calculated precision. This wasn't a loss of control. It was a punishment. Blood filled her mouth, warm and metallic. She cried out, begging him to stop, but her pleas only seemed to fuel his disgust. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he stepped back, chest heaving. He straightened his cuffs, looking down at her battered body with cold detachment. "I have a flight to Chicago at 6 a.m. for the merger," Bradley said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion, as if he hadn't just beaten her half to death. He reached onto the side table and scooped up her apartment keys and her purse. "Clean yourself up. If this place isn't spotless by the time I get back on Friday, you'll see what real discipline looks like." The heavy oak door slammed, the deadbolt engaged. He had locked her in. Madeline lay on the floor, the silence of the apartment pressing down on her. Every breath was agony. Her left eye was already swelling shut, and she couldn't move her right arm. Desperation clawed at her throat. She needed a hospital. She needed the police. But a cold, hard truth stopped her. Bradley's older brother, Detective Warren Jenkins, was a decorated veteran of the Boston Police Department. The last time a girlfriend of Bradley's had tried to file a domestic report, Warren had made sure the paperwork vanished, and the girl was run out of the state on trumped-up drug charges. Calling 911 wasn't a rescue, it was a death sentence. Bradley would be out on bail before she even left the triage unit. Dragging herself across the floorboards, leaving a smear of crimson in her wake, Madeline reached the sofa. Underneath it lay her phone, knocked from her hand during the initial struggle. The screen was spiderwebbed with cracks, but it still glowed. She had no family left. Her friends had been meticulously alienated. There was only one person in the world who existed outside of Bradley's sphere of influence, a ghost from a life she had tried to leave behind. 2 years ago, Madeline had walked away from Lorenzo Moretti. They had grown up together on the gritty streets of South Boston, two kids sharing secrets on fire escapes. Enzo had been her protector, her confidant, her first kiss. But when his father was gunned down outside a bakery in the North End, Enzo had inherited a dark, blood-soaked empire. Madeline, desperate for a clean, safe life, had given him an ultimatum. Enzo had chosen his family's syndicate, and he had let her go, promising never to pull her into his shadows. Her bloody finger hovered over his name in her contacts, Lorenzo. If she called him, she was crossing a line she could never uncross. But as she tasted her own blood and felt the broken bones in her chest, Madeline realized she didn't want a clean life anymore. She wanted to survive. She pressed the green button. It rang twice. "Maddie?" His voice was deeper than she remembered, thick with a commanding gravel, yet laced with immediate, undisguised shock. "Enzo." Madeline choked out, a sob finally breaking through her bruised lips. "Enzo, can you come get me?" 3 miles away, in the private soundproofed back room of Trattoria Il Panino in the North End, Lorenzo Enzo Moretti was in the middle of a war. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the scent of espresso. Across the circular wooden table sat the heads of the Valenti crew from Providence, demanding a 30% cut of the port operations. Enzo, dressed in a bespoke charcoal three-piece suit, sat with lethal stillness. At 28, he was the youngest Don on the eastern seaboard, ruling his syndicate not with the chaotic violence of his father, but with a cold, terrifying intellect. Flanking him were his two most trusted lieutenants, Carmine, a giant of a man with scars crisscrossing his jaw, and Dante, quiet, lean, and deadly. "We want 30, Enzo," the Valenti boss sneered, leaning forward, "or the shipments sit in the Atlantic." Enzo opened his mouth to deliver a counteroffer that would likely end in bloodshed when the burner phone in his inner breast pocket vibrated. It wasn't his business phone. It was a sterile, untraceable line. Only two people had the number: his mother, who was fast asleep in a heavily guarded estate in Brookline, and the woman he hadn't spoken to in 730 days. Enzo raised a hand, silencing the room instantly. He pulled the phone out. The cracked screen illuminated a name that made his blood run cold. Maddie. He pressed it to his ear. "Maddie?" "Enzo." The sound of her voice hit him like a physical blow. It was weak, wet, and trembling. It was the sound of a wounded animal. "Enzo, can you come get me?" The cigar smoke in the room seemed to freeze. Carmine and Dante watched as their boss's posture shifted. The calculated diplomatic Don vanished, replaced instantly by something primal and violent. Enzo's dark eyes went completely hollow. "Where are you?" Enzo asked, his voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly whisper. "Home. Commonwealth. He locked me in. I'm bleeding, Enzo. I can't breathe." 17 minutes, Enzo said, his tone absolute. "Stay awake, Piccola. I'm coming." He hung up the phone and stood. "We're in the middle of a negotiation, Moretti," the Valenti boss barked, slamming a hand on the table. "You sit back down." Enzo didn't even look at him. He pulled a suppressed Glock 19 from his holster and placed it squarely on the table. "The meeting is over. You get 10%, and if you ever raise your voice at me again, I'll bury you under the Tobin Bridge. Dante, handle them. Carmine, get the car. Now." The sheer, suffocating aura of murder radiating from Enzo left the room paralyzed. 90 seconds later, Enzo was in the back of a black, armored Lincoln Navigator. Rain had begun to slick the Boston streets, reflecting the harsh glare of streetlights. "Commonwealth Avenue," Enzo ordered, racking the slide of his weapon. "Run every light. If a cop tries to pull us over, ram him." Carmine didn't ask questions. The heavy SUV roared to life, its massive engine tearing through the narrow streets of the North End, blowing past a red light onto the greenway. In the back seat, Enzo gripped the leather armrest until his knuckles turned white. Madeline, his Maddie. For 2 years he had kept his distance, enduring the agony of her absence because he believed she was safe in her bright, sunlit world. He had ordered background checks on Bradley Jenkins when they first started dating. The man was a corporate shark, arrogant and entitled, but there had been no criminal record, no history of violence. Enzo had backed off, thinking she had found her white-collar prince. He had been wrong, and the price of his mistake was her blood. The navigator tore down Starro Drive, the speedometer needle burying itself past 90. Enzo's mind raced, calculating, planning. Bradley Jenkins, VP of Meridian Financial, brother to a dirty BPD detective. The dossier on Bradley was already compiling in Enzo's photographic memory. "We're here, boss," Carmine grunted, throwing the SUV into a harsh, screeching halt against the curb of the luxury high-rise. It had been exactly 16.5 minutes. Enzo didn't wait for Carmine to open his door. He was out on the pavement, ignoring the freezing rain, striding toward the glass-fronted lobby. The night concierge, an older man in a tailored uniform, stepped forward, his eyes widening at the sight of two men in dark suits, radiating pure menace. "Excuse me, sir, you can't—" Carmine grabbed the concierge by the lapels of his uniform, lifting him an inch off the floor and pressed him against the marble pillar. "Penthouse B, give me the master key, or I break your neck." The terrified man fumbled at his belt, producing a heavy brass keycard. Carmine snatched it, dropping the man. The elevator ride to the top floor took 40 seconds. To Enzo, it felt like 4 decades. When the stainless steel doors slid open, they stepped into a private foyer. Penthouse B. Enzo didn't bother using the keycard. He nodded at Carmine. Carmine took a step back and drove the heel of his heavy combat boot directly into the deadbolt. The heavy oak door splintered and crashed inward with the sound of a shotgun blast. Enzo stepped into the apartment, his weapon drawn, sweeping the room. "Maddie, in here." A weak voice called out from behind the kitchen island. Enzo rounded the marble counter and stopped dead. The gun in his hand slowly lowered to his side. Madeline was propped against the cabinets, clutching her ribs. Her face was a canvas of purple and crimson. One eye was completely swollen shut, a vicious gash cut across her cheek, and her designer dress was ruined, soaked through with her own blood. She looked so small, so broken, trembling violently on the floorboards. For the first time since his father was murdered, Lorenzo Moretti felt a tear burn in his eye. He dropped to his knees, sliding across the bloody floor, and discarded his gun. He reached out with trembling hands, terrified to touch her, terrified he might break her further. He gently cupped the unbruised side of her face. "I got you," Enzo whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm here, Maddie. I got you." Madeline opened her good eye, focusing on his face. The cold, ruthless dawn of Boston was gone. This was just the boy who used to buy her ice cream on D Street. She let out a ragged, agonizing breath and slumped forward against his chest. "He locked me in," she sobbed into his suit jacket, clutching his lapels with desperate, bloody fingers. "He's going to kill me, Enzo." Enzo wrapped his arms around her, lifting her as easily as if she were made of glass. He stood up, cradling her against his chest, her blood soaking into his pristine shirt. He turned to Carmine, who was staring at the scene with cold, professional fury. "Take us to the private clinic in Brookline," Enzo ordered, his voice suddenly void of all warmth. It was the voice of a reaper. "Call Dr. Rossi. Tell him to have the trauma suite ready." "Done," Carmine said, stepping aside to let them pass. "What about the guy, boss? Jenkins?" Enzo paused in the doorway of the shattered apartment. He looked down at the blood staining the Persian rug. He thought of the detective brother. He thought of the pristine corporate life Bradley Jenkins enjoyed. "Find out where he is," Enzo said softly, his eyes locking onto Carmine with a demonic emptiness. "I don't care if he's in the sky or in a vault. You find him." "And Carmine?" "Yeah, boss?" "Tell Dante to prepare the meat lockers at the port. Jenkins isn't going to die tonight. Tonight, he's just going to disappear." Opening hook. She thought calling him was a death sentence. But the real nightmare was what he would do to the man who broke her. When a mafia boss arrives to save the woman he never stopped loving, the city's golden boy is about to vanish without a single trace. The sterile, sharp scent of medical-grade iodine and soothing lavender was the first thing Madeline registered. She didn't wake up to the cold, unforgiving hardwood floor of the Commonwealth Avenue penthouse, nor to the agonizing, sharp pain of her shattered ribs. Instead, she was enveloped in the plush, pristine white linens of a motorized hospital bed. The rhythmic, reassuring beep of a heart monitor echoed softly in the dimly lit room. She forced her good eye open. The private recovery suite in Dr. Vincent Rossi's underground Brookline clinic looked more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. And sitting in the leather armchair beside her bed, bathed in the amber glow of a single reading lamp, was Lorenzo Moretti. He hadn't slept. He had shed the ruined, blood-soaked suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his crisp, white dress shirt, revealing the intricate ink of the Moretti family crest climbing his left forearm. He was leaning forward, his elbows resting heavily on his knees, his dark, exhausted eyes fixed unblinkingly on her face. When he saw her stir, the tension in his broad shoulders broke slightly. "Hey," Enzo murmured, his gravelly voice dropping to a gentle, impossibly soft whisper. "You're safe, Piccola. You're safe." "Enzo," Madeline breathed, her voice raspy. She tried to sit up, but a sharp ache bloomed in her chest. "Don't move," he instructed immediately, standing up and gently pressing a warm, calloused hand against her uninjured shoulder. "Doctor, Rossi said you have 3 fractured ribs, a severe orbital contusion, and a hairline fracture in your left wrist. He pumped you full of painkillers and set the bones. You're going to be okay, Maddie. I swear to God, you're going to be okay." Tears pricked her eyes, blurring her vision. "I'm so sorry, Lorenzo. I promised I would never pull you back into my life. I promised I would stay away from your world." Enzo's jaw clenched, a muscle feathering furiously beneath his olive skin. He sat on the edge of the mattress, incredibly mindful of her injuries, and carefully took her unbandaged right hand in both of his. "You didn't pull me into anything, Maddie. I never left," he confessed, his voice thick with a raw, agonizing honesty. "I checked on you every single day. I stayed away because I thought Bradley Jenkins was a good man. I thought he gave you the bright, clean life you deserved. But if I had known, if I had suspected for a single second that he was putting his hands on you, I would have ripped his heart out of his chest a year ago." A cold shiver ran down Madeline's spine at the mention of Bradley's name. "He's coming back on Friday. His brother, Warren. Warren is a detective. Enzo. He's going to look for me. If he finds out you took me, he'll use the police force to hunt you down. Bradley controls everything. He has so much money, so much power." A dark, terrifying shadow passed over Enzo's face. It was the look of the Don, the ruthless apex predator of the Boston Syndicate. "Bradley Jenkins doesn't have power," Enzo corrected her, his tone dropping to a chilling, absolute zero. "He has an illusion, and as for his detective brother, I am already handling it. You just rest. Bradley will never breathe the same air as you again." Across the city, the illusion was already beginning to crack. Detective Warren Jenkins stood in the center of Penthouse B, his Boston Police Department badge flashing under the harsh, recessed lighting. The heavy oak door lay in splintered ruins in the hallway. 2 of his trusted, off-the-books patrolmen were securing the perimeter. Warren stared at the pool of dark, drying blood on the Persian rug. He pulled out his phone and dialed his younger brother's number. Bradley answered on the second ring, the background noise of Logan Airport's private aviation terminal humming behind him. "What is it, Warren?" Bradley snapped, annoyance dripping from his voice. "I'm boarding the charter to Chicago in 5 minutes. "Your girl is gone, Brad," Warren said coldly, stepping over the shattered wood. "And somebody kicked your front door off its goddamn hinges. Looks like a professional hit. There's blood everywhere." "What the hell did you do?" A beat of heavy silence hung on the line. "She got out of line," Bradley sneered, though a hint of genuine panic now threaded his voice. "She was flirting with Jonathan Pierce at the Fairmont. I disciplined her. She must have called someone. Find her, Warren. She doesn't have any family. Pull the building's security cameras." "I already tried," Warren hissed, rubbing his temples. "The cameras were wiped remotely 17 minutes after you left the building. Whoever grabbed her has serious tech and serious muscle. I'm running a trace on her cell phone now, but the signal died somewhere near the north end." "I don't pay you to make excuses, Warren," Bradley shouted over the phone. "I use her art gallery to wash $3 million a month for the Navarro cartel. If she talks to the wrong people, if she goes to the feds, the Navarros will skin us both alive. Find her and shut her up. Get on your plane, Warren commanded. I'll activate the precinct. I'll put out a citywide bolo for any black SUVs speeding through the area. I'll find Madeline. Warren hung up the phone, his heart pounding. He dialed the precinct's dispatch, preparing to utilize the city's entire police network for his personal manhunt. But before the call could connect, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Warren turned, his hand resting on his service weapon. Standing in the ruined doorway was Captain Miller, Warren's commanding officer, flanked by 4 heavily armed internal affairs officers. "Captain?" Warren asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What are you doing here?" Captain Miller looked at Warren with profound disgust. "Detective Warren Jenkins, please surrender your firearm and your badge. You are under arrest." "On what charge?" Warren demanded, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Racketeering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit money laundering," a new voice answered. From behind the IA officers stepped Special Agent Brendan Gallagher of the FBI. He held up a thick manila folder. "We just received a highly detailed anonymous dossier outlining your entire operation with your brother and the Navarro cartel, including offshore bank statements and audio recordings. You're done, Warren." Warren's face drained of all color. He realized instantly that this wasn't police work. This was a surgical, orchestrated dismantling of his life. Someone infinitely more powerful than the Navarros had just stepped into the game. Bradley Jenkins straightened the lapels of his bespoke suit jacket as he walked across the rain-slicked tarmac at Logan International's private aviation terminal. The sleek, twin-engine Gulfstream sat waiting in the shadows, its massive engines whining with a suppressed, immense power. He was highly agitated, his pulse racing from the chaotic phone call with Warren, but beneath the fear, he felt an undeniable sense of absolute security. Chicago was a safe haven. Warren would handle Madeline's sudden disappearance. He climbed the steep aluminum stairs and stepped into the luxurious, mahogany-paneled cabin of the private jet. Bradley immediately poured himself a generous glass of aged scotch from a heavy crystal decanter resting on the sidebar. He sank deeply into the plush leather captain's seat, pulling out his sleek laptop to review the Meridian financial merger documents. He took a long, burning sip of the amber liquid, letting the warm alcohol momentarily soothe his severely frayed nerves. "Good evening, Mr. Jenkins," a voice said from the front of the cabin. Bradley looked up sharply, fully expecting to see his hired pilot. Instead, standing casually in the narrow aisle, was a lean, dangerously quiet man wearing a dark, tactical turtleneck and a tailored blazer. It was Dante. "Who the hell are you?" Bradley demanded, his heart skipping a beat as he looked out the window. The ground crew was gone. The tarmac was terrifyingly empty. "Where is my pilot?" "Your pilot was compensated to take the night off," Dante replied smoothly, his hands resting easily at his sides. "And I am the man who is going to politely ask you to put the glass of scotch down and walk back down those stairs right now. Or, if you prefer, I am going to break both of your kneecaps right here and drag you down them by your ankles. The choice is yours, Bradley." Bradley scoffed, though his hands were trembling uncontrollably. "Do you know who I am? I'll have you locked up forever." Dante did not smile. He simply drew a suppressed pistol and shot the crystal decanter on the table. The muted sound was followed by the explosive shattering of glass, covering Bradley in liquor. "Walk," Dante commanded, his voice devoid of warmth. 45 minutes later, Bradley Jenkins woke up. His head throbbed violently. The roar of airplane engines had been entirely replaced by a low, rhythmic mechanical hum. He opened his eyes, shivering violently. The surrounding air was unnaturally freezing, easily well below 0 degrees. Every breath felt like inhaling tiny, sharp needles. He was tightly bound to a rusted steel chair. Above him, rows of massive frozen cattle carcasses hung from thick iron hooks, stretching far back into the dimly lit shadows of the cavernous room. The sharp metallic smell of frozen blood filled his numb nostrils. He was trapped inside an industrial meat locker. Heavy footsteps echoed against the frosted concrete floor. From the dark shadows emerged Lorenzo Moretti. He wore a long black wool overcoat, his breath pluming in the freezing air like thick smoke. Behind him stood Carmine, casually cracking his heavily scarred knuckles. Bradley's eyes widened in sheer terror. He knew the infamous Moretti crime family. "Mr. Moretti," Bradley stammered, his teeth chattering uncontrollably as the sub-zero temperature began to bite into his skin. "I don't understand. If this is about money, I can explain. I can cut you in. Just name your price." Enzo stopped 5 feet away from the chair. He looked down at the trembling man before him. He felt nothing but cold, burning, bottomless hatred. "You think this is about dirty money?" Enzo asked, his deep voice echoing menacingly off the thick walls. "You think I care about change?" Enzo stepped closer, his hollow eyes locking onto Bradley's terrified face. "You broke 3 of her ribs," Enzo stated, his voice dropping to a dangerously soft whisper. "You fractured her wrist. You beat her. You locked her in a room, bleeding and suffocating." Bradley's breath hitched violently in his throat. The horrifying realization hit his brain. Madeline. She wasn't just a nobody. She belonged to the Dawn. "No, wait," Bradley begged, hot tears streaming down his face, instantly freezing to his cheeks. "Wait, please. I didn't know. I swear to God, Mr. Moretti, I didn't know she was yours. I would never have touched her." "She isn't mine," Enzo corrected him fiercely, stepping into Bradley's space. "I am hers. And because of what you did to her tonight, your brother is currently sitting in a federal holding cell, facing 20 long years for racketeering and extortion. Your bank accounts have been entirely seized. Your corporate reputation is absolute ash. You have absolutely no one left to call for help ever again." Bradley sobbed openly, struggling uselessly against the zip ties binding his wrists and ankles. "Please don't kill me. I'll leave forever." "I'm sorry." Enzo stared at him for a painfully silent moment. Then he slowly turned his broad back. "I promised her a very long time ago that I would try my best to be a better man," Enzo said quietly. "So, I'm not going to shoot you. I'm not even going to touch you." Enzo walked slowly toward the massive steel vault door of the meat locker. "Carmine," Enzo called out softly. "Yeah, boss," the giant replied, stepping forward. "Turn the cooling fans down to -20 degrees and lock the heavy door." He stepped outside, sealing Bradley inside. Enzo dialed the clinic. "How is she doing, Vincent?" Enzo asked, looking out over the dark water of the harbor. "She's awake, Lorenzo." When Enzo walked back into the private recovery suite exactly an hour later, the sun was rising over the Boston skyline. Madeline was sitting up slightly. Her bruised, swollen lips curved into a small, fragile smile. Enzo walked over and sat down on the edge of the mattress. "It's over," he promised softly. "He will never, ever hurt you again." She pulled him close, safe. Did Enzo go too far, or did Bradley get exactly what he deserved? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and smash subscribe for more gripping, real-life inspired mafia romance audio dramas. We upload thrilling new stories every single week, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Turn on the notification bell and share this video with a friend who loves a dark night.